So, out of all the moves shown on social media, I think the slip cut might be the one that vexes me the most. I don't know if I've said that or claimed that for any other move out there. I think I've said that a couple of times. But genuinely, the slip cut is something that I think is very much so misrepresented on social media. And I'll basically get into that a bit later on. But the slip cut is a very simple move. It's something that we all very much so know, because you're just taking the top card and you just slip the card on top of the deck into the center of the deck. It's a very, very simple concept, and a bottom card slip cut does exist, and so does a slip cut that's done on the table. But for the sake of just this video, and for the sake of just fighting the fact that people are doing the slip cut like this on social media, I'll basically just be concentrating on the in the hands slip cut and the top card slip cut in this video. So yeah. So the idea of slipping a card from the top of the deck into the center of the deck under a cutting action isn't actually new. It's actually one of the oldest things that's been published in Magic history, because one of the oldest manuscript that details sleight of hand has it in its description. So that thing is called MS3. That was, I believe, the 18th entry to it, sorry. And, or you might otherwise know it more under the name of the ASCII manuscript, which was published around the 1670s to the 1730s. So it's basically a 300-year-old move. We don't have access to the original publication. I mean, most of us plebeians, I guess. But there are translations that you can access. So for example, there is an unpublished G-Nougat translation of Nouvelle Récréation physique et mathématique back in 1769 by Edme Gay-Guillot. So that was unpublished, but of course it is published now. Otherwise, you can of course find translations of the text in Gibecière, volume 8, number 1. That was in 2013 by the Conjuring Arts Research Center. So there's just passages of the ASCII manuscript translated in those in that book. So that's yeah, it's genuinely a very, very old move. But the first mainstream reference to the slip cut or the backslip that we all know nowadays is in Modern Magic back in 1876 by Professor Hoffman. So even the oldest mainstream entry of the move dates back to like 200 years old. So yeah, it's a very, very, very old move. Now notice that I said the backslip or the slip cut that we all know and love nowadays, because there's actually more variations to the slip cut. That is the thumb slip cut. So of course people know the slip cut as using the pinky most of the time, but you can actually use your thumb. The oldest known entry to the thumb slip cut is actually the Downs Hinge Shift by Thomas Nelson Downs. That was published in the 10 New Sleight of Hand Card Tricks back in 1920 by Charles T. Jordan. But this particular sort of thumb slip cut is pretty interesting, because it was actually done with a rubber band wrapped around of the deck to basically insinuate that the magician isn't in control of anything. And then it was actually done as a cover pass. It was done as a secret action. Whereas in most instances, a slip cut is a very, very overt action. It's a very, very open action. But later on, in a 1924 letter between Thomas Nelson Downs and Eddie McGuire, it is revealed that Thomas Nelson Downs actually does the thumb slip cut as an overt action as well, and not just as a cover pass. So that's just something that's relatively interesting. But of course, considering how the original sort of backslip, pinky slip cut was originally published around 1970 to 1730, it wouldn't be surprising if the thumb cut was actually published before Charles T. Jordan's book, so before 1920. So I wouldn't be surprised if it was published before 1920, because it is just that old. So that's the general history behind the slip cut. And again, I'm just covering the in the hand slip cut. There is of course the bottom card slip cut. There is of course the table slip cut. But again, this is just the brief history behind the in the hands top card slip cut. And even just that dates back to 300 years old. So it's such an old move that I really have to wonder what other classic moves holds such an old history, because again, it's such a simple concept, but the fact that it dates back to the 1670s is just mind-blowing. It just proves how long magic has existed for, even though we don't really see references to it throughout history. So let's talk about the slip cut that we're all familiar with, the one that we call the backslip. So you actually rarely do the slip cut alone. I know it's called the slip cut, but you actually rarely just do it as like a regular cut. There's a couple of things that do kind of use it as a cut, but generally it's just, you rarely do it as a direct cut, if that makes sense. So let's go over the backslip first, and then we'll go over some applications for the backslip and how it actually just makes sense. So to start off, you're actually going to go into a dealer's grip, and then your right hand is going to reach over and grip about half the deck in a bill grip. So now you have both hands on the deck, like so. All right. Under the cover of your right hand, your left middle ring and pinky finger actually go ahead and wrap around of the deck. So now the pads of those fingers actually contact the top card. They won't apply any sort of pressure as per usual, they'll just be there for friction. So then your right hand actually just lifts up about half the deck, but it's going to lift it at an angle. So you're not going to lift it directly straight up. It's actually going to sort of hinge it around of those left fingers over here. All right, and it's going to lift it until it's about at a 45-degree angle. From there, you're just going to lift up your right hand, and then this packet is just going to go along with it. But because the pads of these fingers are actually contacting the top card over here, they're actually going to anchor this top card down. So you'll notice that when I actually go ahead and lift up on this top packet over here, this card actually just stays behind. So the moment that I start lifting this packet, this card stays there. I continue to lift it, and then the moment that this packet just clears this top card is just going to get flopped over on top of the bottom packet. And it's just going to do so because these fingers are curled on top. So it's just going to, pressure-wise, just pop down like so. And that's basically the backslip. It's a very, very simple concept. You're lifting the packet up, anchoring this card down, you lift it up, and then pop, and then it goes free, just like so. And that is the backslip. Now, for the backslip, if you actually look at people doing the move, you'll notice that there's actually a habit of people actually crisscrossing their hands. So what they do is that they're actually just going to move their right hand backwards and then over the wrist after doing the backslip. And that is because they're actually doing this motion as a covering action. They're doing this to sort of cover the action of this card slipping through. And of course, they have to free the top packet away from the top card as well. Right? But there's actually one big problem with this move, and that is because the card has to, well, travel a lot. If you actually take a look at the slipped top card, this card has to essentially go all the way here to there, right? And that's a lot of, well, traveling for this top card because it has to move as much as the top packet has moved, which is why the crisscrossing action is actually used as a covering action. So then you can actually just hide the motion of this top card flopping on top. But there's actually a problem with that, and that is it just doesn't look good. Because realistically, how many times does your right hand actually just goes and hovers here, right? It's a very, very rare thing, and solely associated with the backslip. The only instance that you see people actually doing this with their cards is when they're actually doing the backslip. So as a result, people just recognize this motion as being from the backslip because no one actually does this. This is a very, very odd motion that's only done to cover the backslip, right? So this covering action is solely made for the backslip, and as a result, through association, this motion automatically equals backslip, right? Because realistically, again, how often do you actually crisscross your hands? It's just an action that looks really, really odd. But that's how you know people haven't read The Royal Road to Card Magic, because the description of the backslip in that particular book actually contains a covering action that I think is a lot better than this particular sort of covering action. In that book, there's no crisscrossing action. Instead, you turn both hands over as you execute the backslip. So if you actually take a look at the book, what the authors actually describe is when you actually execute the backslip, both wrists are actually going to turn over. So you do your usual backslip, but instead of just moving your right hand backwards, you're going to lift it up. You're going to lift up on the top packet, and then you're actually just going to rotate both wrists. So then the cards are now face up, all right? And through that action, this card just gets peeled away. And now you're in the optimal spot for your left index finger to just point to this card. So you're going to go like, okay, so you stopped directly over here, right? So this index finger is gesturing to the face-up card on the top packet over here. It's going to gesture to it, and it's just going to go like, okay, so you saw this card, so we're going to use this card instead, which is the card that is being slipped. So that is the justification that is included in the Royal Road to Card Magic, and I think it's infinitely better than whatever this thing is, right? Because at least there's actual justification for why your index finger is here, and it's part of the rotating action. Your index finger will naturally land on this card, right? It will naturally land on the top packet over here. Whereas with this, you have to go out of your way to do this, and it doesn't even look good. So, and that's why I think that this covering action just looks so much more interesting. And again, it's just a backslip over here, right? Of course, this angle might not be the best, but it does get the point across. Now, there is another way to cover up the slip cut, but this does require a table in front of you. So most people actually move this packet backwards. I think that's a mistake. Why would you ever move this packet backwards? Because then you'll lose the right hand as cover. Right? That's not a good idea to actually do. Instead, you should move the right hand forward. So, if you're ever doing the backslip and you grip the top packet over here, notice that my thumb is actually near the left bottom corner over here. This means that if I actually want to cut forward, it only has to travel that little bit before my right hand is clear of the top card. So I do the backslip as per usual, but if I just move this top packet to the left until this thumb clears the top card, so I just move it until this thumb clears the top card, if I just cut forward like so, that looks a lot better. That looks so much better than just retreating into your own hand. Now, if I actually just move forward, this actually just makes sense because I have to cut the deck forward for just a regular deck to be cut, right? It's included as part of the motion, whereas this you have to go out of your way to actually do, whereas a cutting motion is part of it, right? And to add on to it, your right hand will naturally cover the action because now your right hand is cutting forward, so you're covering the slip cut as you go. So just cutting forward, I think, is an infinitely better covering action than moving backwards. Okay, so just cutting forward, so moving the packet to the left until your thumb clears the top card, and then cutting forward, I think looks infinitely better. Okay, so that is just two covering actions that I think makes the slip cut look that much better, because people do this, which I don't think looks good at all. But if you do something like this, right, that looks so much better, and there's justification for it, and you can also, of course, just cut forward and also looks extremely good. So those are just two covering actions, and so yeah, it's better than just the crisscrossing action. But of course, if you find a covering action that suits your particular needs and your particular context better, why not use it? But those are just two of the contexts and covering actions that I find fit me better for a slip cut. And so yeah, I hope that people stop doing this because it just doesn't look good. Before we get into the applications, let's really see what the slip cut really is. At its core, the slip cut is either a displacement of the top card because you're displacing the top card to the center, or it's an addition to a card that's in the center of the deck, right? If I have a face-up card in the center, I'm adding one card on top. Or you can also look at it as a cover pass because fundamentally, they're the same principles, right? A cover pass, if I wanted to move a card second from top, right? I would just do a sorry, I'm mixing up my moves now. If I just want to do a cover pass over here, right? If I just want to do a cover pass, right? Sorry, my hands are shaky, right? If I just want to do a cover pass, that's fine. But if I actually did a slip cut, it would be the exact same thing, right? It's literally the same move. A slip cut and a cover pass are essentially the same move. The only difference is that the slip cut is an overt action. I'm cutting the deck openly, whereas with a cover pass, one is a hidden action. I'm doing one thing sort of hidden. So that is the main difference between the two, but fundamentally they're very much so the same sort of action. So we think about the slip cut like that, we can have just a couple of applications. The most famous one is of course the slip cut force, right? The force card is of course going to be on top of the deck. You're going to riffle through the deck, right, with your left thumb, but notice that I'm actually just bending one half of the deck. And that's so then I can actually keep the top packet low with the bottom packet. So then when I actually slip this packet out, this card won't have to travel as much, and then this card will just join the bottom packet that much faster. So I don't have to have this card just travel that much. So this card can just, you know, just slip faster on top, okay? So that's why I have the right side just sort of touching the rest of the deck over here. So it's just going to be here, and it's just going to be touching it, right? So you'll notice that half of the deck is still relatively square with the other half, like so, right? So now you're going to riffle, ask the spectator to say stop wherever, right? And then from there you can use either covering actions. So, oh, you want to stop there? Perfect. And then, okay, so you stopped at the 7 of spades, but because you saw this one, we'll use this card instead. So you can do that. Or you can do the cut forward action. So say stop wherever. All right, here. All right, perfect. And then you just cut forward. And of course, then you have the card where they stopped at. So of course, that is the slip cut force. Very, very regular use of the backslip. It's pretty much the same thing as the backslip. The only difference is that now you have to know the top card, or you're forcing the top card, and then you just execute whichever sort of method that you want for the slip cut, for the backslip. Now, just as a bonus, there's something called the pencil force, and that is from Farelli's Card Magic, Part 1, back in 1933 by Victor Farelli. So it's basically just an alternate handling to the slip cut. So basically you hand the spectator a pencil or a pen or whichever that you want, and you're basically just going to ask them to stab the pen through the deck as you riffle through it. All right, so you're just going to say, okay, just stab it through. So then they stab it through wherever as you're riffling through it. You're going to stop there, and you're like, okay, perfect. You want to stop there, or you want to like take it back out and stab somewhere else? They stop there. That's fine. Your right hand's going to come over. It's going to clip this pen with your index finger and your middle finger. The rest of the fingers grip the top packet as per usual, just like so. And then you're going to do the first covering action. So then you're actually just going to execute the backslip, and then you're just going to turn both wrists over. So you're just going to turn them over like so and say, okay, so you stopped exactly over here. But of course, since we saw the Jack of Spades, we're going to use this card over here. But again, it's just the regular backslip slip cut force. The only difference is that now the audience actively stabs the pen there. You clip it, and then you're just executing the backslip like so. Okay, so that's the only difference, and otherwise it's just the normal gesturing action for the backslip. So that is just the pencil force. Now, if you have a card selected from the center via a dribble, after displaying the card, you have the perfect opportunity to somewhat add a card on. So I have a card selected from dribble, and as I turn this card back over, I'm essentially just going to prop this top packet into a Charlie position. But because I'm propping this top packet in a Charlie position, I can essentially just execute a slip cut over here. So when I actually just do the slip cut, now I have a card added on to the card that was selected. So now this can act as a switch or can act as an add-on, right? So if we take a look at the move again, have a card selected, do whatever, right? Prop it up, execute the slip cut. So now you have one card added on top. This is a switch. Now they think that their card is right over here when in fact it's actually second from the top. So if I want to use this move as a control, I can take this card very openly, place it in the center, place it on top of the table packet, and then I can just place the rest of the deck on top, square everything up, and then the card is going to be on top, right? Or of course, you can basically just use it for whatever that you want to use a switch for. So of course you can use this for an ambitious card or whatever, or yeah, just about everything that you really want, right? So that's just an alternate sort of handling if you really wanted to. So that's just yeah, the slip cut as an add-on, as an addition. And of course, because this move is a displacement, you can have a card of your choice move to the center of the deck. This is of course the concept used for the force, but if you really want to displace a card of your choice, it's not just for a force. So if you have the 4 aces on top, so if I just want to cut to an ace, for example, you can of course do things like an ace cutting routine, right? So if I want to, I'll just randomly riffle through the deck and I'll just cut to it. Then, of course, I know that I cut to an ace because I used the slip cut, right? So it's just the same move. It's just the same move with the same covering actions, but it's very, very different ways of looking at the move. Because if I just have an ace on top and just cut forward, now it's suddenly an ace cutting move. But it doesn't have to be, right? Because realistically, this is just a force. But I'm forcing an ace 4 times in a row. So if I have about 4 cards I want to cut to on top, right? Here, I'm going to cut to the Jack of Diamonds, right? Place it back on top. I'm going to cut to the Queen of Spades, right? And then cut to the 3 of Hearts. And then, of course, I'm going to cut to the Ace of Hearts, right? That's just it, right? It's the slip cut force done 4 times in a row. But because you're seeing this as a displacement rather than a force, you can do this as an ace cutting routine or whatever that you want from it. So really, it's just doing the move 4 times, but you're just sort of perceiving it differently. And that goes for every sort of application to the move, because you're just doing the same move, but you're just thinking about it differently, right? It's still the same slip cut, but now I added an extra card on top. And because of that, it's used as a control, right? So those are just some applications for the slip cut, which you can also apply to the next few slip cut variations. So let's talk about doing the slip cut from the thumb. The original entry, as we've spoken about in the history section, comes from 10 New Sleight of Hand Card Tricks back in 1920 by Charles T. Jordan, and the move was called the Downs Hinge Shift by Thomas Nelson Downs. So it's honestly the variation of the slip cut that I prefer, but to each their own. So essentially you hold the deck in a dealer's grip, but your left thumb is actually just going to be laying on top of the deck, just close to the left long edge over here. So again, it's just sort of the side of the pad of your thumb that's sort of laying on top like so, right? And again, no pressure, it's just all friction over here, okay? Your right hand approaches the deck and grips the top half in a modified bill grip. So only your middle and your thumb are just going to be gripping the top half, and they're going to be gripping it through the short edges close to the right corners over here. All right. Your index is just going to be curled on top, and your ring and your pinky are just going to be sort of floating there. You're just going to then lift up about half the deck, sort of angled away again, angled towards the right. And then your right hand is just going to move to the right. And because of friction from your left thumb, the top card just sort of stays behind, like so, right? And the moment that this top packet sort of goes enough, so it basically almost clears the top card, that's when you're actually going to execute the rest of the slip cut, sort of like a hinge or a trapdoor motion. So what we're going to do is that you're actually just going to bend your left wrist downwards. So it's just going to bend downwards, so then the bottom packet is going to be perpendicular with the floor. It's just going to bend like so. This card, this packet is just going to go directly onto the table. Your left hand is just going to untwist. Your right hand then grips it and then completes the cut. But of course that is actually just done to sort of hide the motion of the slip cut. So in reality, it's actually just going to move to the right, bend, and as you bend your left hand, this packet goes directly down. So it's just going to be a combo motion. So it's just going to go like this, right? Unbend and then like so, complete the cut. So that is just doing the slip cut with your thumb. So again, it is my preferred variation because you don't have this weird moving to the left motion. Of course, you do have to move this packet to the right, but because your right hand is on the right, I think it makes a lot more sense, right? So that is just something that I want to sort of introduce as well, because most people do it from the pinky, ring, and middle finger, and it results to things like this. But of course, I think that if you do it from the thumb, it looks infinitely better. And of course, that is just another slip cut. And of course, it can be used as a false cut if you ever want to retain this card on top of the deck. In Card College Volume 1, Roberto Giobbi actually cuts the packet forward with no hinging action. Of course, that again retains the top card on top of the deck, right? So it's just the same thing. You're just gonna move this packet sort of to the right, so then your thumb clears the top card, and then he cuts it forward, and then you just complete the cut like so. It's not really something that I like. It's the same mechanics as the Downs Hinge Shift, but you don't have that trapdoor motion like so. But I much prefer the Downs Hinge Shift because there's actually a part that can flash from here. So then you sort of have to angle your wrist weirdly for it to look less flashy, I guess. Or you can of course take a smaller packet like so. But I prefer the Downs Hinge Shift as is. But of course, if you want to do the Roberto Giobbi version, that is up to you. So of course you can just cut forward like so, okay? Same difference, same mechanics, just cut forward with no hinging motion, and then that is the Roberto Giobbi slip cut. And just as a little bonus, I'll talk about a move that's technically a slip cut, but it's a rather interesting one. It's the Cottone, I think that's how you pronounce it, Cottone Spider Grip False Cut by Joseph Cottone. So it's from More Card Manipulations issue 3 back in 1940 by G. Newgard. And so for most slip cuts, you'll actually notice it's actually the top packet moving forward and leaving the top card and the bottom packet behind. Right, so this one stays put, whereas it's just the top packets that's sort of moving forward. But for this one, it's actually the opposite. So you're gonna grip the deck in this modified bill grip in your right hand. Your index finger is gonna be on the left long edge. Your pinky is gonna be on the right long edge. Your thumb is gonna be on the bottom short edge, like so, where it's actually going to be close to the bottom left corner over here, and then your middle ring finger are just going to be on the front short edge, like so. Okay. Next, your left hand actually comes over from underneath, and your left thumb actually grips the left long edge, and your pinky finger grips the right long edge near the corners. So they're about over here. Your ring finger and your middle finger are just sort of resting there, and your index is just going to remain curled on the bottom, like so. So we're in this very, very bizarre grip over here, all right? Your right thumb then lifts up on the top card, so it might be a bit difficult to lift up directly on one card. So if you want, you can just sort of rock the deck backwards, like so, and this bevels the deck, right? So you're just going to flatten out your middle ring and your thumb. So it just rocks it backwards. And as a result, you can then just lift up on one card a lot easier. This is, of course, just like the thumb count first method. So you're basically just doing a thumb count, right? Rock the deck backwards, lift up on one card, and there we go, okay? Your left thumb and your left pinky are then just gonna lift up on about half the deck, half the top packet over here. So they're just gonna lift up on about half the top packet over here. Right, so then this top packet over here is completely independent from the bottom packet and the top card over here. All right, you're then going to apply pressure with your index finger and your pinky finger on the bottom card over here, so on the bottom packet over here, so then it anchors it in place. Right, so now you have pressure applied on the bottom packet with your index and your pinky. And then you have pressure applied on the top packet with your left thumb and pinky. So then you have basically two independent blocks, and the top card is just sort of floating there. Now you can actually just release with your right thumb. So then now you can actually move these two blocks away. So you're just going to move it away from the two packets, all while keeping this top card sort of pinched in place. So now when you actually start to move this right hand forward, it slides the bottom packet and the top card, right, free from the left hand. So it's just going to slide out. And that's because, again, of the pressure applied by the index finger and the pinky. So this anchors everything in place. And of course, the top card now acts as a cover card, because this card essentially just convinces people that's actually the top packet being dragged forward, right? So if I have this on top, now it looks like I'm just grabbing the top packet, right? It looks like I'm just grabbing the top packet and this is the bottom packet being left behind, when in reality, I'm grabbing the bottom packet. So I'm grabbing the bottom packet forward, and then I place everything down on the table, leaving the top packet behind. So then I can just grab the top packet and I complete the cut like so. So then this just displaces one card while retaining the order for the rest of the deck. So again, this is a very, very unique example of the slip cut where it's sort of done the opposite way, because this time it's the bottom packet and the top card that's being moved forward, whereas usually it's actually just the top packet that's moving forward. So it's sort of an inverse sort of thing, but it just sort of proves that there's quite a few things that you can explore with the slip cut. So if you want to learn more about the slip cut and its many different variations, you can look up, of course, more card manipulations by G. Newgard. There's also Expert Card Conjuring by Alton Sharp. There is Marlowe's Magazine by Ed Marlowe. Vanishing Ink recently just reprinted all 6 of the Marlowe's magazines. It's relatively pricey, but there's so much knowledge compacted into those books that I do recommend them. There's Gambling Sleight of Hand by Steve Forty. At this point, I reference it so much. There's Mr. Jennings Takes It Easy by Larry Jennings, written by Richard Kaufman. A lot of, basically, so much of Larry Jennings' work is published in that. So he has he has a couple of things with the slip cut in that book. And of course, Cy Enfield's Entertaining Card Magic by Cy Enfield. There he has something called the Enfield slip cut, which is different from the things that we've seen nowadays. So yeah, that is just a couple of resources that you can look at if you are interested in the slip cut and how to do it properly. So yeah. I actually don't really use the slip cut that much, and even when I do use the slip cut, it's actually the Downs hinge shift, because again, like I said, it's the variation of the slip cut that I much prefer. But the problem is with the slip cut nowadays is that people, and even lay people, have become so familiar with the slip cut that it's sort of become a sort of problem. And the additional problem is that people just see the slip cut as this nowadays, right? They just see this, and that's because it's been poorly poorly taught throughout the internet. And it's sort of a shame because it's such an old move, and I think that much like every other technique, but especially moves this old, it deserves to be taught with a bit more attention to detail, and this just doesn't cut it. This just looks bad. There's no reason as to why this even exists. And again, lay people know this too. And it just doesn't look good. But that's what people teach on social media. That's what people teach on YouTube and stuff like that. So I hope that this video does somewhat remedy this sort of problem, especially for people who actively seek out just better resources on social media if they can't afford, you know, books and stuff like that. So yeah, I do hope that you do treat this ancient move with a bit more respect. And yeah, I do hope that you read up on the references that I provided, because again, this is an old move, and a lot of those subtleties which made this slip cut good have sort of disappeared in this sort of sea of information. So I do want to sort of highlight the slip cut and all its glory. So yeah, that is the slip cut. Hope you guys enjoyed, and yeah, just read up on it, treat it with respect, and yeah, stay safe, stay healthy, and see you guys on the next one.